Well, it's official, what we've kind of known all along about this Browns team as they continue to compile the losses. But as of today, mathematically eliminated from playoff contention officially after a 27-14 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously not the way that that Browns fans and the Browns themselves had hoped it would go. There was a lot of talk about just potentially being the first team since 1988 to sweep the Pittsburgh Steelers. There was talk about winning here for the first time since 2003 in the regular season, and none of that came to fruition. And Megs, like, it was weird. Like, this game, it didn't feel like the Steelers like dominated you, being a first place team in the AFC North, being one of the teams obviously right in the mix for maybe the top seed in the AFC. They didn't completely dominate them. I mean, the offensive discrepancy in terms of like yards and stuff was pretty comparable and close. Like it wasn't some like blowout game, even though the scoreboard maybe showed that a little bit. But it was just the Browns kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Offense really couldn't get any rhythm. I thought the defense, for the most part, sort of like limited the damage and kept them off the scoreboard. And then the offense on the flip side just couldn't kind of answer. And it was too many turnovers, too many penalties, too many mistakes.
Yeah, and I'd even argue that I think the offense was even okay for points in this game, and your special team really let you down, man. It's like you look at this game can be explained with the special teams conversation, because the Pittsburgh special teams, they made 2 field goals. They had no turnovers on special teams. Cleveland missed 2 field goals, 2 chippies. I think it was a 33-yarder and a 28 or something like that, or 43 and 30. It
was 43 and 38, I think, is what they were.
Yeah, and chip shot field goals that you miss, and then you muffed the punt at the end. The punt was kind of like whatever. That was salt on the wound, but it's what bad football teams do, unfortunately. Like we want this team to be good. It has the ingredients to be good. The defense was good for the entirety of the game, I thought, in my opinion, but they were let down by mistakes and missed opportunities, and it's really just continued marks of a bad football team.
We do need to talk about Dustin Hopkins, but can I just ask this point blank? Is Kadarius Toney even on this roster by Tuesday morning?
I don't know.
Is he even on this roster by Monday morning? I gave him a little bit more. I give him a little longer than 24 hours. I don't know.
He's Ubering back to Cleveland, dude. Like that
he's gonna be waiting in the media lot for somebody like me to give him a ride home, I guess. After
right. I'm like, the whole Kadarius Toney thing has been weird from the jump. Like, I don't even know why they ever picked him up.
I mean, he's been sort of lurking in the shadows, practice squad, not really doing much. We'd ask about him every now and then. It was just like, yeah, he's doing some nice things. And then the first game he gets to, like, I mean, listen, Jalen Darden this week, he was released because of special teams mistakes last week for the Browns. Yeah. And then you're putting him out there, giving him a chance to actually like show something, and he gives you special teams mistakes. He gets called for the unsportsmanlike conduct, which he said afterwards, like, he didn't really even know he got called for it. I don't know if he was actually intending to like throw the ball at the guy that he was kind of talking to. I don't know if I couldn't see in the sort of the zoomed in video if there was an official over there or not. But either way, he still went and doubled down by muffing the punt. It was like, this is the Kadarius Toney that's always kind of shot himself in the foot in this league. Like, it's the reason why he can't keep a job in this league consistently, because he makes boneheaded mistakes. And I kind of joked on Twitter. I was like, at the penalty, I said, I guess he's officially a Brown now, because that wasn't supposed to be a shot at the Browns, it was supposed to be a shot at him. Like, this guy always makes his mark on teams by doing something stupid. And then I was like, actually, after the muff punt, now he's officially a Cleveland Browns. That was the biggest mistake he could possibly make.
It was it just like, it sucked, man. Because, I mean, to tell the truth, he had 3 great returns before he started messing up.
Yeah, he wasn't bad.
Really good returns, and that's something that is an element of the Browns team that we haven't had in a long time. And I think there's got to be a serious question asked of Bubba Ventrone and the whole special teams unit as a whole.
Which sucks. It sucks because Bubba's a good dude. He's a good coach, from what I understand. And like last year, I thought special teams was pretty damn good, all things considered, especially where they had been previous years. But this year, there's just been way too many mistakes, which is kind of. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, all of our special teams units outside of Jerome Ford's long kick return at the start of the half have been terrible all year long. Like, not even bad, like horrible.
Yeah.
All year long, and it's every single game stuff keeps popping up.
Yeah, I mean, it's been bad. It is going to be kind of funny, though, when this team obviously isn't going to be a playoff team when they finish with whatever record they're going to finish with. and we know what the biggest problem is with this team at the quarterback position, and somehow Bubba Ventrone's going to end up the one on the chopping block. It's just going to kind of be funny that's the piece of meat that they give up to the fans. Just saying, as we keep it moving here. But no, on the since we're talking about special teams, we got to stick with Dustin Hopkins, because I do think, like, in sort of a weird game that, like I said, didn't really feel like anybody really dominated. I think he was maybe the biggest story to come out of this, because he has struggled mightily this year after having a career season last year and going 8 for 8 on field goals at 50+ yards. He had the 58-yarder a couple times, which is his career high. Like, he had a brilliant season last year, and then this year, it's been just an unmitigated disaster, and he just can't figure it out. And, after the Saints game, I know we talked, Megs, like, he said in the locker room, he thought he sort of figured out what the problem was at halftime, and he was looking forward to kicking. He didn't get another chance to kick a field goal in that game, but he was kind of looking forward to that opportunity because he thought like he'd sort of figured it out. Yeah. Here we are now, 4 weeks later, and it's the same thing. Like, he pulls it left a lot, and then after he pulled it left, he even admitted he sort of overcompensated a little bit. I know he talked afterwards. You give some of your thoughts, but then I do want to play this clip from Dustin in the locker room afterwards.
Yeah. I'll just real quick. It just you see guys who get the yips. I think I tweeted it out too. Like, I've never seen yips like this since like John Lester thrown over to first base. Like, you can't. It's unbelievable. There's no when he walks on the field. There's literally no confidence that I know fans have. I know I don't have it when he's out there. He certainly doesn't have it, and he says all the right things. But it's really bad. And to go from the penthouse that was last year to the outhouse that is this year is a shocking turn of events in just 12 months.
Yeah, well, and let's play this clip, because you mentioned it. He seems like he has the yes, but what's funny about that is, like, and you'll hear this in this clip, I think, he says that it's nothing mental for him. Like, he feels good about himself. That's the wrong way to say it. He doesn't feels good about himself isn't what I mean, but like, he feels good when he shows up on game day. He's just not making them. So here's a little longer version of what we're just talking about, and Dustin's kind of response to the 2 missed field goals today.
Everybody ready? Okay, I'll start and then I'll take some questions. Yeah, I mean, I'm paid to make those kicks, so I want to. I want it more for my teammates and the coaching staff and ownership in this city, I think, more than I want it for myself. So, yeah, I want that for this group. And it's frustrating in one sense. Like, obviously, professionally, I invest a lot of time and effort into what I do, and to see it not come to fruition is frustrating. It's been a frustrating year. But at the same time, like, my foundation, y'all probably heard me say this again, my foundation's in Christ. It's unshakable. I'm not afraid of failures or successes, either one. I still have peace on the field, even though it hasn't, necessarily turned into made kicks as much as I want. I still feel really good mentally, which might not make sense to some people out there, but I feel good. I'm not panicked. I just need to find a good swing. And so the swing has been tough to find today. This year.
Yeah, listen, Dustin says all the right things. He takes ownership every single time. As fans, I think that's the biggest thing people ask for. It's a hard gig, man, because you go from, like, again, last year it was brilliance, and we all thought he was worth the contract, and then this year he's just regressed, and it's weird. And I kind of actually asked him, like, year to year, why can it be so different? And he used, like, people use so many golf analogies for kickers, but he did sort of reference that, like, some days you go out and you feel great, then other days you go out and you don't. He was like, so yeah, like, this year it just hasn't been there for me. So I don't know, like, it's hard because I don't want to rag on Dustin too much, because I know he puts in the effort. If he says he feels like he's in a good spot in terms of, like, where he's at, like, sometimes things are just weird with kicking, but at the same time, like, it's a harsh business. Being a kicker's tough. Like, it's a results based thing. You got to make them. And this year he now leads the league with 9 misses, and it's something that's kind of holding back. It's not the only reason that this team is being held back. Obviously, they have a lot of problems, and maybe that's part of the biggest reason why Dustin isn't talked about more. I think fans obviously know he struggled, but they're not, like, up in arms every single day talking about Dustin Hopkins. Yeah, because this team has more problems than just that. But at the same time, like, in a season where if this was a season where, like, they were in the mix for the playoffs, like, we'd be focused on those things a lot more because he's not making it.
That's the thing. If this team had any consequence to it, if this game meant something, like if the Browns were competing for the AFC North or a wild card spot, and that's the misses, or those misses come back to haunt you, that's where the biggest concern is. And as you look forward to the next coming years, and we asked the question of like, hey, where's this team going to go at the quarterback position and at offensive line? And we talked about Jed Wills before the game at left tackle and running back, all those things. You can make all the right moves, and then, kicker misses a kick. Ask Tony Romo what that feels like, because all of those things have to go right.
That's my quarterback.
That's my quarterback. That was good. But yeah, it's like that's the part that's wild. And for him to be so good last year, and Spencer so clutch every time he walked on the football field last year, it didn't matter if it was in the dog pound or if it was in SoFi Stadium. You thought that ball was going right through the uprights, and this year it is. And that, like you said, the hard part about being a kicker is it's a pass-fail class. Like, you either make it or you miss it.
It's the best analogy. Yeah.
You don't get an 85% for making it just a little left or a little right. It either goes through or it doesn't. And for him this year, it's just not going through, and it's getting worse and worse. The kick he missed right, the second one, missed by like 27 yards.
Yeah, and like I said, he said he overcompensated on that one, which he said he doesn't usually do that, but he did this time, and it obviously backfired on him. We might have buried the lead a little bit on this topic, because Kevin Stefanski was asked about it, like, will you bring in any other kickers? Will you look anywhere else? And he flat out said, like, no, Dustin's our kicker. I almost feel like you can put a lot of things from this season are going to fall into the bucket of everybody gets a mulligan. We're hearing a lot of talk about, like, there's not going to be any major upheaval with the coach, with Kevin Stefanski, with Andrew Berry, with the team brass, the higher ups, the powers that be, if you will. Because they're going to kind of get a mulligan for a year that didn't quite go the way that everybody expected. I think Dustin Hopkins falls into that category as well. Part of that is his contract. If you were to move on from him, you still owe him like $5 million that you got to spread out over a couple of years here. So I don't think they're going to do that. But I also think, like, you saw what he's at his best. So they probably are going to be like, we'll stand by him and see how it goes next year. It's a lost season, but it's a lost season for everybody, and we'll just kind of pick things up next year and see where we're at. So yeah, I'm not anticipating a change there, even though I know on social media fans might be asking for it. Speaking of major changes, though, Megs, we talk every week about Jameis Winston, and listen, like, he gives you some incredible performances, some incredible moments, things that you look back on and feel, okay, this guy can be a bridge quarterback for the Browns moving forward. And that's been one of the most, a topic that's dominated the Browns circles, whether it's on Reddit, whether it's on radio, whether it's on these platforms. Can he be the guy next year that sort of takes the reins and leads this team while Deshaun Watson just kind of sits? And it's a fair question. I guess I want to ask you, though, like, today was one of those games where, like, he was again, he had a couple moments. The touchdown to Jerry Jeudy was great. He boots out, gets close to the line of scrimmage, and then finds Jerry Jeudy right down the middle of the field with a nicely placed ball for a touchdown. And it kind of felt like the Browns are going to build some momentum from that. But he finishes the game 24-41, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Like, the interceptions are a problem. They cost you against the Broncos, and largely, like we talked about, they cost you today. Do you believe at this point that he is the bona fide bridge quarterback for this team?
So at this point, yeah, I do. And there's a couple reasons why. Yes, the first interception on the screen pass was one that changed the entire game. The Browns were up 7-3 at that point. It felt like you were kind of stacking stuff. Like, okay, this is happening. It looks right. You're doing all the right things. We're now into the second quarter. Your defense is playing their tails off. We're looking really good. And that just changed the whole momentum of the game. And he talked about it at depth. And he's like, yeah, I was trying to do my job, type of a thing. That one, he has to dirt. He absolutely has to put that one in the ground. It was clunky to start. And then the second one, you at that point, you have to rush it. You're rushing it down the field, rushing and going. But pull all that back, Spence, even with the first pick, like, if we make our field goals, you go into half down 17-10, and then would it have been 14-10? We were on 14-7 at half.
I think did they miss? I thought he missed one in the first half, one in the second half, right?
Yeah,
so it would have been 14-10. 14-10. Yeah.
Last drive of the first half. Yep, it would have been. Yep, it was 13-7. You missed that field goal, so it would have been 13-10. You come out of half, and then you miss another one. So it should be 13-13 at that point. And now you have yourself a football game. Instead, you miss those field goals, and then the Steelers go right down the field. They take a 20-7 lead. Then we turn it over on downs because we can't kick it anymore. So again, another opportunity to kick it again. If we were playing well, we turn it over on downs. Steelers go right down the field, score. And now the game's over. Now you're just trying to push it down the field. Jameis Winston. Yes, he messes up. The turnovers are bad, and they were bad last week. They cost us. They cost us again today. But I said it last week. I'll continue to say it. He'll step up toe-to-toe with anybody in the league. Steelers are going to compete for the 1 seed, and you don't get that with most quarterbacks in the league. So if he is, going to return next year, that still gives you confidence because you will go toe-to-toe with Lamar Jackson, with Russell Wilson. We'll see Patrick Mahomes next week, Tua Tagovailoa. And the list goes on, but Jameis will at least go toe-to-toe with those guys.
And that is the reason why I think he'll be back next year. I don't know, man. Like, it's tough, though, because, again, we bring up Dustin Hopkins and maybe not harping on him so much because we're dragging him completely because, again, it's a lost season anyway, and the kicks don't really matter as much when you're 3-9, now 3-10. But, like, same thing applies to Jameis, right? Like, if this was a team that was in the hunt right now and you lost that game on Monday night to a Broncos team that is also fighting for a wild card spot because of 2 pick sixes, and you lose a game to the Steelers today that could have helped you with your footing in the AFC North, or you're just in general your standing in the AFC as a whole, like because of his interceptions, fans wouldn't be treating Jameis so kindly. Like it's nice, and he is a palate cleanser. He's a little. I feel like a good way to sort of describe him is like he's the sorbet, right? Like he cleanses the palate. He makes you feel good before you sit down and you have like the full course meal. And he's got the quirky quotes and all this different stuff. And I'm not saying I have anything against Jameis. Like Jameis is a great dude. I think he can do all those things that you mentioned. Like he gives you a shot, sure, but it's the games that he sort of throws away that are the problem. And listen, ultimately, like I said, I think he's probably back next year anyway. Because it's not like this team's going to have a ton of options to upgrade the quarterback position. So I think you're going to sort of have to bring him back. But I do find it interesting that everyone's like so willing to just be like, he's the guy, when in a lost season, there's been some reasons why maybe you pump the brakes on that thought. Again, I think it happens. I think he's back. So it's kind of going to be a moot point anyway. But I just kind of find it interesting because like the context of the season, I think matters here as well.
It's funny because he's so volatile. Obviously, like his floor is Josh Allen. His ceiling is Josh Allen. His floor is like, I don't know, early Bryce Young, like
Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, Johnny Manziel. It's the good is so good and the bad is so bad.
I mean, like that screen pass he threw, and again, I know like, I forget who it was now. Keanu Benton. Came out of nowhere, and so I don't think he really saw him, but you could see from up where we were, like that play was blown up from the start. There was already a defender kind of in the way of Nick Chubb, and it was like, why are you even throwing it? And I understand, like, Nick Bonito made a really good play the other night on Monday Night Football, so it's not always him. Sometimes, he even said, like, God, these guys get paid too. So, yeah, like sometimes they're going to make a good play, but sometimes it's like, it's that gunslinger mentality, and I get that people love that. It's why they love Baker Mayfield. It's why they loved Joe Flacco last year. Yeah. But for as much as people were harping on Joe Flacco, and this is also why I know what I'm saying is true, because if this season actually meant something and they were still playing for the playoffs right now, people would not just accept that he threw 2 picks today and be like, that's our bridge quarterback. Because last year I saw Joe Flacco throw 2 pick sixes in a playoff game, and everybody said it was his fault they lost, even though the defense played like crap that day. So I'm just not sold like 100% that like he's the answer, because I know how Browns fans are going to react to a meaningful game that he loses. This season hasn't meant much since like week 4. So it's tough, but I don't know. Like, I love Jameis. He's a lot of fun to cover. He's a lot of fun to see out there on the field. But I do think there are some like questions there in terms of like, again, the volatility and just how up and down it can be.
I would say this is that, like, if you get into the playoffs, if you're a wild card team, and I think that is what you bring Jameis back, you're not expecting to go win the North and be the 1 seed. You bring Jameis back to go 10-7, maybe 11-6, and be a wild card team. All that said, if you get in with Jameis Winston gunslinging that thing around and you're in the playoffs, you it wouldn't surprise anybody if they strung a
There's a chance he could get bounced in the first round because he throws a bunch of picks. There's a chance he could go on like a Joe Flacco-esque run, like take it to the Super Bowl.
And it's there, and it's like, all right, are you getting that with Drew Lock, or are you getting that with? I'm just thinking of guys we watched today, like whatever it is.
Sam Darnold, we'll see. Like he's leading the Vikings right now. Is he gonna? How far is that team gonna go? It's a good question. Yeah.
It's a great conversation to have, and maybe it's a song for another time. But it's while super refreshing at times, it's like, dude, come on.
Yeah. And listen, he gives him a chance, and that's the biggest reason why I do think he'll be back. Along those lines, on the offensive side of the ball, Jameis and Jerry Jeudy continue to have just an otherworldly connection. Jerry actually talked after the game because that touchdown catch he had in the first quarter on the Browns' second drive was his last catch, his first catch and his last catch until like late in the third quarter. And then he had back-to-back catches sort of late in that quarter to sort of bring the quarter to an end. And he talked about it, like the Steelers did something different they're usually a one high safety team. And today they were playing a lot of two high. Like we always hear about the two high safety look and how that prevents like the big plays. And it's obvious that they saw what Jerry Jeudy did to them in Cleveland a couple weeks ago. And they saw what Jerry Jeudy did on Monday night. And they were like, all right, we got to step up and sort of defend this differently. And they did that. So credit to the Steelers for trying to sort of take him away. But I think the big picture thing here, Megs, is like how good and on the same page Jerry and Jameis are. And the fact that Jerry, in this quest above all these questions about like, can he be a number one wide receiver? I think he's kind of proven that in front of all of us, because when you're getting different looks and teams are sort of now scheming to prevent you from having big play capabilities and those types of things, I think that's a testament to the fact that Jerry Jeudy is starting to garner a little bit more respect as that type of player in this league.
And he is not only just running down the field and running past guys and making big catches. Like he's doing everything. He's making short catches. He's not a big tackle breaker, but he is hard to bring down because he is kind of shifty. But he's catching balls across the middle. He's running crisp routes. He's like everything that you want. And truth be told, and knock on wood, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. He's been fairly durable this year, right? That's been one of his things in Denver. He was always getting banged up, but haven't really experienced that. And him and Jameis have been on some kind of tear. And they're fun to watch. That first touchdown was so cool, so good. Jameis rolling a little left, throwing it back just a little bit back across his body, and then it hit Jerry in perfect stride. And at that point, I'm sure me and all of Cleveland were like, oh boy, we're about to run these boys out the gym. Obviously it didn't work out like that, but Jerry's been really, really impressive.
One other note on the offensive side, because I think it's worth bringing up, Nick Chubb, obviously, in his return to Pittsburgh, not a superb game. People want kind of this Hollywood story where he like breaks off and has 100 yards for the first time this season. First of all, I don't think the Browns are that type of team. They mix and match a lot with him and Jerome Ford. But he did go 11 for 48 yards, had 4.4 yards per carry, his second highest yards per carry of the season. The New Orleans game, I think, was just a couple ticks higher. I'm starting to come. I shouldn't say I'm starting to, but the last couple of weeks have sort of proven that I think Jerry Jeudy. I think Nick Chubb is going to need another. I think next year we're going to be talking about a guy that could maybe start to look like the guy he was, at the peak of his powers. But I don't know that we're getting that guy this season. But I thought you saw some glimpses this year. He had a few, especially in the second half, that he sort of started to break through to the second level. There was a little bit more of a burst, and so I was encouraged by that. But I think this knee injury kind of set him back to a point where, like, now he's got to, it's going to take some time for him to really get back to that player, and people might have had too high expectations for him here in this first year back.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, because there was one clip today, and I'll bring it up later in the week when we do some film stuff, but there was a very clear cutback for him. Like, he got to the hole, very clear cutback, and 2021 Nick Chubb would have pounded on that cutback and took off and exploded out, and it would have been a 15, 20-yard gain. Instead, he kind of got like stuck in his cut. He wasn't really quick in and out of it, and it looked really, really uncomfortable, him getting through what we're so used to being a easy cut for him. Just one that stood out to me. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's give him another offseason, let him continue to grow up his strength, his confidence, his speed, and see what he looks like next year, because I think that will be more indicative of what he'll be into the future, not so much this small sample size as he's returned.
Along the lines of what I mentioned earlier, that it didn't feel like anybody really, dominated the game. Some final stats for you. Pittsburgh had 147 passing yards, Cleveland 196. So it wasn't like either team was like really lighting it up. And then both teams went over 100 rushing yards, 120 for Pittsburgh, 104 for the Browns. A little uncharacteristic for them. They were pretty well balanced today, which was kind of a surprise for this Browns offense. But again, it was the turnovers that were the big difference. 2 picks, 1 fumble, 2 missed field goals for the Browns. 1 fumble was the only turnover that the Steelers obviously had. And there was a couple other miscues in there. The penalties were an issue. I know Germain Ifedi got in trouble for an unnecessary roughness call after he threw a punch. Kevin Stefanski had some things to say about that. But yeah, like it was just another one of those days where the Browns are, sort of showed that with the sum of their parts, even at the moments when they've looked like they could be more competitive, they're still just kind of a bad team. And when you play the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are a pretty strong fundamental team under Mike Tomlin, that's kind of what you're going to get.
It was funny. You mentioned it earlier, and I think we touched on it a little bit, but Jameis touched on it as well. And I encourage everyone to go check out his post-gamer on our YouTube page because it's pretty good. Really insightful stuff. He always gives good content from that, but it wasn't the funny Twitter stuff you see. It was really thoughtful. But he had talked about how the Browns just beat themselves today. And it felt like, Spence, the Steelers just they didn't do anything. It felt like Tomlin just took his hands off the steering wheel and was like, oh, they're just going to crash their car. They're just going to crash it. We just got to just pick up the remains because Steelers didn't do anything special. They truthfully did not. The Browns defense played really, really well. The Browns moved the ball kind of up and down the field, but every time the Browns had 5 turnovers, right? 2 picks, 1 fumble, 2 missed field goals, and a 4th down, just couldn't get out of their own way.
Yeah, and that kind of team that tends to happen in this building, especially. Browns still haven't won a regular season game here since 2003. They haven't swept the Steelers still since 1988. So still 2 things that'll be monkeys on their back for next season and potentially beyond, but we'll see what next season brings. Megs, playoffs out of the question officially now. I think we already knew that, though. What lies ahead for this team? You got the Chiefs coming to town on Sunday next week. Then you get the who's after that? What am I missing? Bengals on the road. Then you get the Dolphins at home for your last game of the regular season at home, and then you go on the road to the Ravens to sort of finish things out. So 4 games to go. And at this point, Miles continues to really emphasize that without anything to play for playoff-wise, it's about playing for pride. It's about playing for the name on the back of the jersey and the front, but it's about playing for the name on the back of the jersey and making sure that people know, hey, I'm not just going to quit on this team. And I do think that's been the biggest saving grace for Kevin Stefanski to this point is this team hasn't quit. You can tell they're still coming out and trying to play hard, and that does mean something in the grand scheme of a locker room setting and guys still believing, even though the season's obviously been lost for quite some time.
Yeah, and that's the good attitude. And the other thing too is those are 4 playoff teams, right? They are potentially Bengals, probably not
Dolphins. Dolphins are legitimately a team that you could if you beat them in a couple weeks, you might be knocking them out of the playoffs if they keep finding ways to win and kind of go on a run here. Ravens, maybe the same thing. Ravens have struggled the last couple weeks. If they lose a couple more games, they might end up being on the fringe. So Chiefs are the Chiefs, they're in. But yeah, other than that, there's a lot of Bengals have a very outside chance. So that this is a lot of teams that you could sort of play spoiler and take pride in something. And I think this team's actually done a pretty good job of finding reasons to take pride in the matchups that they still have left.
Dude, Spence, there's a real chance that Week 18 is for the AFC North because the Steelers schedule, they go Eagles, Chiefs, and then Ravens potentially. They got 3 hard ones right in a row. And
no, I think it's who'd you say was next week for them? The
Eagles.
So they got the Eagles, and then they play the Ravens, I think, after that, because that's the weekend before Christmas, because they play Saturday, and then they play the Christmas game against the Chiefs. So that could be tight at the end of the year. You're right.
And if those 2 teams are tied, and you're going to Baltimore to beat the Ravens and make them a wild card team, you have 4 chances left to continue to play well. And as Grant Delpit said, it didn't work today. Feels like there's voodoo over that stadium. Anytime we go there, it's always bad vibes. But if we can't have it, take it away from those guys. Make their lives tougher. One thing I do want to call out before we get out of here, Spence, I think a shout out is in order for David Njoku. Because 13 targets, 7 catches, 42 yards, and that awesome touchdown. Obviously been a disappointing and frustrating year for him, but he's still hanging in there, still scoring, still looking pretty good. To do that alongside Jerry Jeudy, and 8 different guys scored or had catches today. So Jameis was kind of ripping it around, but always happy for David Njoku when he gets in the end zone.
And I'll say this about David Njoku: last 2 years, when there's been a quarterback change, it's his numbers have gone up. And I wrote about that actually in my takeaways piece. His numbers the last 6 games or so versus what they were earlier and how similar to last year, like the quarterback change has just benefited him. He has scored 80% of his touchdowns this season with Jameis Winston. I think like just under 50% of his receptions have come with Jameis Winston, and like 75% of his yards have come with Jameis Winston. So he's, he thrives with the quarterback of Jameis' style, and those two have a really good connection the same way Jerry and Jameis have a good connection as well. Along the lines of the website, be sure to head on over to si.com/NFL/Browns. You can find my takeaways from today's game. I actually need to add one because I didn't have time to get Kadarius Toney in there, and that is an observation that needs to be written about because that guy might not even be on the roster tomorrow. But yeah, you can find more stuff like that, content from during the game, after the game, and otherwise, you can also find more videos like this at the Cleveland Browns on SI YouTube channel. Our pregame conversation, even though I guess it's a little dated now, our postgame conversation, other postgame conversations, and of course, all the press conferences from Kevin Stefanski to Myles Garrett, Jameis Winston, locker room. Dustin Hopkins spoke today as we sort of played you the clip there. You can hear everything he had to say, all of that available to you at the Cleveland Browns and SI YouTube channel. For Anthony Moeglin, I'm Spencer German signing off from Pittsburgh at Acrisure Stadium, which, by the way,
sucks.
It's a shame that they changed the name. Okay, they should have kept it Heinz Field. They had a good gimmick going. They had the ketchup bottles, which one of the ketchup bottles, Heinz is now like a sponsor of one of the gates or something like that, and the ketchup bottle's like hanging up there. It's not the same. It's not the same. So shame on the Steelers for changing the name of this fine stadium. It should just have stayed Heinz Field forever, but it is what it is. So,
like
guys,
the one bad organizational move they've ever done. That's it.
I mean, money talks, so they must have just got money from Acrisure instead of Heinz, but whatever. Why we get to bitch about it because that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Appreciate you jumping on in with us, and as always, keep on following along with all things Cleveland Browns with the Cleveland Browns on SI.